misinformation is rife, and you have the U.S. president attacking, like media. It's gone from health. Like health was the original area where fake news thrived, like where, people were saying, like vaccines cause autism, and, there's some therapy that's going to cure multiple sclerosis. And so like health is an area where it's very sensitive to people. And this is where this fake news, false news, misinformation started. And now we see it seeping into politics, and we see it everywhere.
Carly Weeks is a health reporter at the Globe and Mail, and she also happens to be my sister. We talked about what's happening with journalism, anti-vaxxers, the opioid crisis, what she's watching on Netflix, and my favorite part, the first day of her internship at the Globe and Mail. Spoiler alert, there may have been crying involved. This is my conversation with Carly Weeks. All right.
Talking juice is vodka. That's what's in this cup. I hope you're not rolling on that part.
Okay. So here we are with Carly Weeks. One of your roles is reporter at the Globe and Mail.
It is.
Other role, of course, is sibling to me. So
yes, unavoidable.
People will be saying, "Oh, we've gotten to the bottom of the barrel already. You ran out of guests at 15 episodes, and so here we are."
But actually, I should have been guest one. If a lot of your listeners have been asking where I've been.
I guess. Well, I'm not sure you have any listeners, actually, so I'm not sure they'd be
Okay, that's true, too.
You've been at the Globe and Mail how many years now?
11 and a half, which is frightening.
Years.
Frightening.
What's changed in the media landscape since your first... We'll get into your internship. I want to talk about that.
Oh,
your
my
first
God.
Day at the Globe. But
Wow.
If you had to just say media landscape in general, what's changed 2019 from way back then?
So when I started in journalism school, it was 2004, I was in school, and we were talking about new media and how like blogs and the internet was the thing that we had to pay attention to. So fast forward to now, and then it was hard to get a job, and the discussions were all about how, media is going to be changing because of the internet. And now what we see is like every week now there's like a new slew of layoffs. Like there was, this barely even made news this week, but Elle Magazine,
I saw that, on Twitter.
Canadian Living, and
they got rid of like all but 3 employees.
Yeah, they basically shut down and moved to Montreal.
How do you run a magazine with 3 people?
I don't know. They have like some bots doing it now. I
Probably.
I don't know. But so, and Jesus. I mean, places like the Globe, and when I say frightening to be working there that long, it's like, I mean, this is my dream job. It's just time's going by so fast. We are in a lucky position where, the Washington Post, New York Times, Globe and Mail were owned by, a big corporation with ties to a very wealthy family. And so we invest in journalism at the Globe. There's some great people working there, some great journalism there, but we've also had like many cutbacks, lost people along the way. The newsroom is, a fraction of what it used to be. And basically journalists across the country now are doing more with less. We're having to cover the same amount of stories, if not more, but just with fewer people and less time.
Do you think the quality of the journalism has suffered overall? I know it's a tough question to ask someone working there, but it seems like everybody is, you go to work and it's not, what are the stories I can tell today? It's like, am I going to have a job at 5 o'clock? Like, is there a little bit of that?
To be honest, not at the Globe.
Well,
not today, like knock on wood. But no, we've had rounds of layoffs. After I first started working there, there was one of the first rounds of layoffs back in 2008, and that was really frightening. And that's happened again since. So now we're kind of, buyouts and things like that. That's become the new normal in journalism, and I think people just were more accepting of that. A lot of people who've recently lost their jobs have taken to Twitter to say, yeah, like I knew this day would come, or oh, this is the third time this has happened in the last X number of years. I think in terms of the quality, the people that are out there working, and this is what I think most people don't understand. People working in journalism are dedicated to the truth. They're dedicated to getting the story out. Are there problems? Sure. There's journalists who could be doing a better job. There's publications that could be doing a better job. We had the Toronto Sun recently publishing an article questioning the effectiveness of vaccines, and they since retracted it. But
that was a while ago, wasn't it?
That was like a couple months back. And of course, these sorts of things do happen. I think the biggest challenge we face is that, on the health beat, for instance, there's so many stories we just can't cover. Right now, the Ontario government is basically revamping the entire healthcare system, and it's like going to be
for the better or for the worse.
We don't know yet, and there's not a lot of detail. And then we've seen this week that they are completely changing how autism Programs aren't being funded. A lot of parents are angry. It's just one story of so many, and there's just so many different things. We're inundated all the time, and we just can't cover everything.
Why? Is it because not enough people, not enough bench strength, not
enough people, not enough time, and there's just so much going on. It's too much demand. I mean, you could have a beat just focused on. I mean, we have now a reporter working just sort of like focusing on the brain and those sorts of issues. I focus a lot.
What brain?
The brain, yeah, the brain. I mean, there's so that's like a beat into itself. You could have someone just doing Ontario Health, someone just doing BC Health, someone just dedicated.
So
someone dedicated to opioids? We could have someone just.
Don't they?
They don't. I mean, I do a lot of it. My colleague out in Vancouver, Andrea Wu, does a lot of it. But there's just so much going on there. You could have someone in the States, sometimes in some publications they have like a full-time reporter just dedicated to that.
So is there a lot of stuff taking place that we should know about that we don't?
Yes, and I think that's the biggest problem, especially when you look at places like Guelph, for instance, where their community newspaper shut down.
The Guelph Mercury.
The Guelph Mercury, yeah.
But they replaced it with one of these, they call it like a news website, but it's really just a list of headlines
press releases and things like that.
It's not, it's better than nothing, but it's not hard-hitting journalism.
A couple of these places, so they've popped up everywhere, and we know this well because
it's Village Media.
It started in Sault Ste. Marie, which is our hometown, and so the people at Sault today, they have some like real journalists out there doing their work, and thank goodness for that. But for the most part, it's like a lot of the stuff that they push out is just press releases.
Well, it's when you go to these sites, it's just banner ads. Like
right.
Ads. It's just so it's a mechanism. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, but I think the quality of the news, you're not getting what you used to get with the Guelph Mercury.
And I know from being a City Hall reporter, for instance, in Ottawa, like having a full-time dedicated City Hall reporter meant that I could read through the agendas of the City Council minutes. I remember going to a taxi hearing. This is like some offshoot meeting, and there was like basically a transportation committee meeting about a taxi driver that had like sexually assaulted a patient or a passenger, and no one else was covering that. But I went there and it became a news story. So having someone who's just there to observe.
But what happened with that story, though? Just so people get, like, you're talking about something at a high level, but, like, let's walk through, like, because you were there and able to, like, read the thing over and you were there for this meeting, it turned into a story that had some implications for
and it was, I think, if I recall, this was, like, going back a decade, but it was, like, on the front page of the city section, so other media started to cover it. It became a bigger story about safety and passengers, and we were following it over a number of days. We, I believe, named the taxi driver in question and what happened to him, and I think there was a bit of an outcry.
Do you remember the context of the story?
That's about as much as I recall from that particular story, but there was many examples. That's just one of many examples.
What about there was one where there was something about, because they have those outdoor fruit markets and stuff like that. There was one of those where you what was the story about that?
So I went down to the Byward Market all the time, and anyone who's been to Ottawa knows it's like in the summertime they have all these vendors selling fresh fruits and vegetables. And I started to notice, and I think a reader had also maybe tipped me off to this, but a lot of the produce was not from Ontario, and like you'd see in small writing, like very, very small writing on cardboard, like from Mexico or whatever. And I started to think, well, why am I
supposed to be from like a farm down the road? That's the whole reason you're going there.
Their name at the top is, X Farms, or they have like farm in the name, and I'm like, this is not a farm though. Like, why don't I just go to the grocery store down the road on my way home from work?
Are these prices jacked up?
The prices were, I would say, probably at least as high as the grocery store, in some cases higher. The sellers,
but they were buying it at like a wholesale, like a food outlet or whatever.
This is what we ended up discovering, is that throughout the course of the investigation, we went and we discovered that basically there was like two families that were owning most of the stalls. So you have like a full city street, like this one of these streets filled with these stalls. They were operated by like one or two families for the most part, and they operated, so it looks like it's like a small mom and pop operation, but it's really like a rather large sort of corporation type event. Now all of that is fine, except for the fact that they were marketing themselves as, farm fresh vendors, like farm to table kind of thing. So what we saw were that they were unloading these big wholesale trucks, this and that. I ended up actually going into the City Hall office where all these people were registered. I got all of their contact information and names. We ended up writing this fairly big expose. Anyway, flash forward a few years, I'm walking through the Byward Market 2 or 3 summers ago, and now every single one of the vendors has a sign that has to say who owns the stall,
Right.
and where they're buying their stuff from, and if they're a reseller. So are you actually from a farm, or are you reselling all of your stuff?
So you have transparency as a consumer.
So if you want to go and resell, that's fine, but tell your customers. You know, and
So
that's,
you're not like pulling a fast one on them.
Exactly.
And to me, that's just one example of why journalism's there. Like there were a lot of, whether it's the government or companies, people trying to get away with shit that if there's no one there, like a check and balance or whatever to look at them, like there's people who are like, for a lot of people, it's human nature. They'll get away with what they can if they don't have that scrutiny. So I think that's one of the big things we're kind of missing these days. Before we go any further, I referenced your first day at the Globe and Mail. I want to go back to that. So you had, how many stories do you think you've written at this point?
Oh my God, like hundreds. I mean, it's just... It's about...
So you don't really know, like a lot.
I mean, it has to be over 1,000 now. It's like, I would say the average is like around 100 or so a year.
Yeah.
And that's just sometimes more, sometimes less.
So when you were a kid, you wrote in some paper, or I think it was in the Sioux Star, that you wanted to work for the Globe and Mail, and that was your dream job. So you get an internship at the Globe and Mail.
Yeah.
There's a whole story around that we'll save that for another day. But you get the internship, and I think that you were going to school at Western, and I was living in Toronto at the time, so you came to stay at my house. And so the first day, I think I drove you to the Globe and Mail. It was snowing. It was December, I think.
It was, and I had this hat on, furry hat.
And I hid the hat.
Yeah, you said take that off, and you threw it.
That's not, first impressions are important, and I said that's not a good hat for you. Like, I'm not a fashion consultant.
In hindsight, that was probably a good call.
A good move.
Yeah.
So I drop you off at the Globe and Mail, front door, the exciting day, like you've been dreaming of this. And as you're getting out of the car, what's the last thing I say to you?
Just don't cry.
Don't cry.
Don't cry.
And I said this as a joke.
And this is like some foreshadowing of the end of the day. But I remember the sound of the car door slamming, and you were sort of smiling, saying, "But just don't cry." Because as a child, that was usually my go-to move.
That was your brand.
That was my, like, oh yeah, if there was a brand, it was like whining and crying, and that was me.
Some people would say you're still on brand.
A little bit. Yep. So ironically, now when I hear a child crying, it just really irks me, and whining.
I mean, it irks everybody.
True. Okay. So I must have been very annoying as a child, I guess. Moving on. So I walk into the Globe and Mail, and there's these, for anyone who hasn't been there, I mean, now you can't, it's gone now. But they had these doors that were from the original, like, 1920 buildings, Art Deco revolving doors, just beautiful, and you're standing in the lobby, and it's terrifying, and you go to your desk, and I remember everything so fresh and cool, and I remember exactly who was sitting near me, all of their names. And
who were they?
Jeff Gray was right beside me, and he's now a Queen's Park reporter. Caroline Alfonso was behind me. She's the education reporter, and I now sit near her again. Jonathan Fowley, who now I believe works in communications in Victoria for the BC government.
That's enough. I just wanted to see if you actually remembered.
I do. Oh, I do.
Okay.
So, I remember that I got an assignment, and it was something about snowmobilers in Ontario. I think some had either died, or there was some sort of controversy involving some snowmobile company, and I had to like call them up and write a story about it. And
does that story exist? Is it online somewhere?
It's not, and this is very much part of the story. So I was working away all day, and we were getting close to 5 o'clock when I was told my deadline was, and I was okay, I got to write the story, got to get it finished. And all of a sudden, there's a woman from IT who comes over, and she's like,
"What time of day is this?"
This is like, it's got to be like 4 o'clock, 3:45.
And what's your deadline?
5. And the story's like almost sort of done. I have like, I've got more work on it to do. But it was coming along. So she comes over and she's like, I need to set you up. Because I was working in Word, and the Globe uses like its own program for filing stories. And she's like, I need to set up your computer. So all of a sudden I see the screen kind of like go black, and I'm like, oh, what's going on? And then she's like, okay, like typey, and like, you can just tell something's not right over here. And she steps away, and she's like, I can't get, like, whatever story back up. I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, yeah, it's gone. And I'm like, what do you mean it's gone? Like, you're the IT person. You make it reappear then. Like,
I shouldn't be laughing.
Oh, my God. And usually you can, like, auto-save or whatever, but this is 2004.
I can't believe you didn't save it all day long.
I mean, I think I had saved a version of it, and anyway, it was gone. It was just, like, let's just say it's gone. I remember... when I was in high school, my sister, who's our sister, who's not super tech savvy, wanted to get back at me. So she took an entire essay that I wrote and like just deleted all.
But you were able to find it.
Well, because I'd sent a version of it to you, but she deleted all of the.
Who gave you that idea?
You did.
That's right.
Well, she deleted all of the text and just saved the empty text file because she didn't know enough how to.
We were talking about human nature earlier. There you go.
Yeah. So there you go. Anyway, she feels bad about it now.
I'm sure.
Okay, flashing forward. So I'm back at the Globe. IT lady, your computer screwed up. Everything's bad. It's all bad. The story's gone. And I'm like, oh my God. So she leaves, and I'm sitting at my desk just like, now what? oh my God, I have to go.
I'm never going to work in this business again.
This is the worst day of my life, and it's over. So I had to walk over to the editor.
Do you remember who the editor was?
Bob Cox, who I think is now, he was at the Winnipeg Free Press, and I don't know if he still is.
Have you ever chatted with him about this afterwards?
No, I still like have like just nightmares about it. Maybe I should. Because he was great. Anyway, he was the national editor at the time, and all of the editors sat together. So like the foreign editor, the national editor, like anyone who mattered was sitting.
And it's all open concept.
All open concept, and they're all watching. Like everyone is just sitting there, like in a cube of desks, watching me. So I walk over to his desk, and I'm like, "Hi, Bob," or whatever. He looks at me, and I'm just looking at him. He's like, "What?" And I'm like, "Ah!" And I just started sobbing, like, "I lost my story," and it was like full on, like. You know, you're at like a kid whose ice cream cone just got eaten by like a dog, and everything's terrible, and Christmas is ruined, and you know, I was like just
so what did he do?
Hysterical. So he leaps out of his desk, and every editor's watching me like, like just hyperventilating.
This is your first impression.
First impressions on everybody, and I'm like, as I'm doing it, I'm like, stop crying because you're making it worse.
And are you thinking of the don't cry?
But then, and I'm like, yeah, you're not supposed to cry, which is making me cry more. And then it's like your entire career's over.
Oh yeah, before it even starts.
And then so you're just crying now more because everything's like all hope is lost. I'm going to move back to the Sioux and work at the steel plant. Oh, but they're not even hiring there anymore.
Yeah.
So he walks me back over to my desk, and he's kind of like calming me down. Everything's okay. Meanwhile, Jeff Gray is like, "Oh, geez." He's
watching a career explode in slow motion,
and he's like, "It's okay, it's okay." And so but it's not okay. Yeah. And like they kind of calm me down, and I'm sitting at my desk, and I think Bob's probably like, no one cares about that story anyway. It wasn't like it was a big news story. Like it wasn't
Stop the Presses.
It wasn't a Stop the Presses kind of story. And but I'm still like, oh my God, I screwed everything up so badly. And then I remember Jeff consoling me, and then I remember my phone ringing, and it was you calling, and you're like, "Hey, are you ready to go?" And I'm like, he's like, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, you're not crying, are you?" I'm like, maybe a little. What is happening? Stop crying, just stop. And you're like, I'm coming now, like stop, oh my God. And it was just like, this is crazy. So we went back to your place, West End of Toronto, and your little baby there no, you guys didn't have a baby yet. Oh my God, it was just you two.
Maybe.
No, you did. She was there. Anyway, okay, whatever, that doesn't matter. No offense. But
yeah,
you said, we're going to sit down. I'm like, I'm never going back again. And you said, no.
This is where my problem-solving skills come to the fore.
Oh, my God. So you said, yeah, we're going to go and we're going to sit down.
What was our first stop?
The liquor store.
That's right.
Yeah. Second stop was, I mean, at that point, Blockbuster still existed, but thankfully you had a copy of it at home, 8 Mile.
We watched 2 movies that night.
What was the first one?
Jerry Maguire.
Oh, but I really remember the 8 Mile, though.
Well, because Jerry Maguire got fired from his job, and you know, these fish are coming. These fish have manners. These goldfish are coming with me. Who's with me?
I love that movie.
And
it's a great movie.
And so that was like bottle of wine number 1, and then bottle of wine number 2. What movie was that?
So that was 8 Mile. That was
for whatever reason I felt like at the time, like I'm thinking like, wow, this is the movie that's gonna fix everything.
Yeah.
And like now I'm trying, like, how the hell is
looking back, it's
how is that the movie?
But I think that it was all about the song.
One opportunity.
One shot, you know. And
but actually,
it was like
you messed up your one shot.
I know, but then it's like you have to go back.
2 shots.
So it's like now, but this is the one shot was the internship. So you have to go back and make the internship.
So your internship was basically like, if you look at it through business days, you had 20 days.
Yeah, 20 days. And so day one is
day one's
disaster.
a write-off, but
19 more days to make this. You're like just to own this.
But I said go
thing.
in on day number 2 and pretend walk in and pretend it never happened.
Yeah, and I did, and I was like, okay, like now let's move on. And so I'm proud to say that at the end of all that, and I had like midnight shifts, like you know we were working like late nights, and you're doing all of this stuff. And what's crazy about it is that like when you're coming in there, what?
You stop whacking the table.
Oh, sorry. Can you edit that out?
No, I'm gonna keep that in.
Okay. So anyway, end of it all, I had 5 front page stories. and a whole bunch of bylines. I worked with reporters from like across the country. There's a man who was killed in a suicide attack in Jerusalem, and I came in at 4:00, and I had until like 10 o'clock to write basically his life story for the front page of the next day's paper. And you're an intern, and this is like,
Why are they giving that to an intern, though?
Well, I mean, there was actually another reporter on that night, and I think he was busy doing something else.
Snowmobile. He had to finish the
snowmobile story. But I remember Bob Cox, like the editor, saying, like, basically, he's here to help you kind of like do some phone. And I remember just being like, I'm doing this. Like, I can get this done. I don't need anyone's help.
Right.
And so they had someone who was ready to jump in and save me. But I wrote a story gave the basic outline of who this man was and his life here. And I think I found someone that knew him, and we wrote a piece that was like a tribute to this like guy who lost his life. Another time there was a psychologist who was murdered, and I was pitching in on the reporting of that. There's a big story about salmon and the like risks of farm salmon. I'm down at St. Lawrence Market interviewing fishmongers.
But wasn't there one too? A soldier was killed. Or something?
Soldier was killed.
Call the family.
Yeah.
Wasn't that like pretty early on? Like
that was pretty early on.
How you're students still? How awkward is that? Calling them up and getting like you have to ask for a picture.
It's terrible.
What was the family like?
The family was, I think in that case, they were basically like, we're not going to be commenting, and so you just respect that and you say, okay. And it reminded me of that when this week we saw like the reporters were on the doorstep of
the 11-year-old
Jerry Butts, like the reporters on his family's doorstep
and his wife and
that's when you see the media as being
that's crossing a line.
I would say, I think a lot of people in media would say that does cross a line, like, because there's no news value added. Like, at what point, like,
it's like TMZ.
It's like, what's in the public interest here? Is that part of the story? Is her reaction to her husband getting fired part of the story? At this point, I don't really. I mean, my news judgment would say no, but I mean, I remember when
what do you think? That's partisan journalism, or what is that?
I think it's just maybe like lack of judgment. There's so much.
But these are not rookie reporters.
There's so much interest in the story, so it's like, let's get every angle, perhaps. I mean, I'd say overzealous and just not thinking. But I was reminded of another story when I was an intern in London, Ontario, and there was a boy who drowned, and we had to confirm the drowning. It was in Port Stanley, about a half hour away, and I had to sort of I called up the lifeguards, and they weren't supposed to give us any information. And I said, okay, well, can you tell us anything about the boy that died? And they're like, no, we can't tell you much yet, but this is all we know. And we wrote a story about it, and we had to, it was actually a colleague had to go to the house and talk to the parents. In a lot of cases, they want to talk to you because this is their family member and their loved one, and this is like their legacy. But you have to be respectful because this is also a very painful.
But like knowing you as I do, this is, there's kind of like reporter Carly and there's like human Carly.
Yeah.
And like human Carly wouldn't knock on that door and make that call. So how do you do that?
I don't know, because early on I was terrified of calling people. Like, I used to be so afraid of picking up the phone and calling someone. And now, all the time, I remember our sister one time was visiting, and like I was talking to someone and they just yelled at me and hung up the phone, and she was like, oh my God, like, how are you not like crying right now? And I'm like, oh, I know, it's great. Like, I don't mind. I mean, get mad at me.
So develop the thick skin.
Yeah, because if people are getting mad at you in this business, it generally means
you're on the right track.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on who's getting mad at you.
So great segue. People being mad at you is something that you've become quite accustomed to lately.
Very much.
The whole vaccine issue, anti-vaxxers. This is, you have flu season happening and you have measles outbreaks all over the place. And so this has been something that's been really percolating over the last couple of weeks, and people sending, personal attacks to you. Like, what's going on with the state of the anti-vaxxer movement in Canada? And like, just what do you think the core of all this is? Because it seems like the scientific community is entrenched and like vaccines work, that they just do.
Yeah.
And then you have the anti-vaxxers, like that's big pharma, and you're a paid shill. Like, as far as they're concerned, you're being paid by the drug companies to write these articles.
I had people online saying that I'm sitting on the board of Pfizer.
Congratulations.
I know, right? And I said I get a pay raise when I join the Illuminati, and but to an extent, like, these are people that very much believe in conspiracy theories. And so I think what's happened now, the internet, like, these people were always around, but the internet has now given them a meeting place. And so for the past like decade and a half, what's happened is that a lot of people in public health, so whether it's doctors or sort of public health officials, they, for the most part, when I talk to them, I think for the most part, the attitude is, well, these people are wrong and we're not going to engage with them because they're wrong. So what happens in the meantime is that these people just keep talking. They just keep talking.
Now they have their own publishing tools.
So they have advocacy groups on Facebook, and they're targeting people with ads. And so their voice is getting amplified. And studies have been done that show if you're exposed to these messages.
Well, and the thing is, if you read it, it's kind of like you can believe it, right? Like you know, and it's so easily. You go to Google, which is everybody's doctor. You go to Google and you type it in, and you know, I interviewed someone. I'm gonna forget her name. Dr. Allison something at Mount Sinai.
McGarry, yeah.
So she's like infectious disease expert. She said, look, if you did all the homework, 100% of people would side with, you know, with all the risks and everything else, people would say get the vaccination.
Yes.
She said, but to do all the research, you'd have to do nothing else but read stuff for 2 weeks straight.
Yeah.
And she goes, no one's going to do it. You go online, you go to Google, you get a couple articles from Jenny McCarthy or whatever, and then you're an anti-vaxxer.
I mean, here's the arguments. You know, read the insert that comes with the vaccine. I'm like, well, I have read the insert. Like, if you read the insert of any drug, you wouldn't take it. The
commercials on TV.
They're talking about stuff like they give you information about rare events, things like that. I mean,
they have to.
If we're so scared of vaccines, I mean, like if you think about it, I mean, a drug like Vioxx, I mean, that's a real scandal. There was a drug that the company at the time knew that it was linked to, I think it was heart attacks.
Heart issues, yeah.
And they concealed that information, and then the drug was recalled. Like, it was taken off the market. This is how the system is supposed to work. I mean, you're not supposed to be lying and concealing things, but when it happens, researchers who are outside of that company started to look at this drug. Yeah. That's just what happens with vaccines. They're studied by regulators. They're studied by other researchers.
But you know what also is damaging is like measles.
Yeah, measles. And I think here's the thing. So if you're an anti-vaxxer and you're pushing your message out to people who, you know, are kind of on the fence, or they don't know one way or the other, you start to make them question themselves. So they might not have their kid get the flu shot or the measles vaccine. You know, there's a reporter who said that, you know, she wrote about not being vaccinated as a child back in the 80s because her parents were afraid that she got a tetanus shot and that's all she got, nothing else. So this is what we talk about with vaccine hesitancy. You know, some people, they don't call themselves anti-vax anymore. They say, no, we're pro-safety. I just want
PR.
I just want the information to get out there.
Yeah.
But this is the thing. And so it's very frightening. And then at the same time, so you have people that are sending out these messages. Public health doesn't want to engage. And so basically there's this, they've overtaken the conversation. So now a lot of the first hits that come up, say on Facebook, are all about anti-vaccine messages, you know, questioning the safety.
Well, and also if you look at just everything that's going on with Facebook thrives on controversy. And like they get more eyeballs and clicks when people are angry.
Oh yeah, and you see the anti-vaccine videos. That all the views that they get. But see, people now, measles, the vaccine came on the market in 1963, and so people don't know what measles is anymore. And so when you get it, I mean, yeah, you certainly do. I mean, this is the most contagious virus. This is that virus where if someone with measles coughs and leaves the room, 2 hours later you come in the room, you're getting measles if you've never been vaccinated.
So when, you know, there was a situation a couple weeks ago where there was a sort of prominent anti-vaccination guy. I'm not sure that's how he would call himself, but he was going to be giving a talk somewhere in Toronto at some health conference. And you interviewed him, and then as a result of the story, I guess someone said he's not going to be there anymore, and that got yanked, and that led to a big outcry, and that's where you got a lot of like negative comments and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I'm still getting them. You know, like now, like it's about once a day as opposed to like 5 to 10 times a day. But someone will send me some hate mail. You're pathetic. You're this and that. So this
it's always anonymous.
Yeah, usually, they make up like these names and whatever email addresses. Like you can't trace these people. And
brave.
You know, yeah. And so I wrote the story because the public deserves to know why, you know, corporations and corporate sponsors are sort of why are they standing behind an anti-vaccine guy? Why is this conference happening at one of the largest venues in the biggest city in Canada, welcoming this guy who is very close collaborator of the father of the anti-vaccine movement, the guy who invented this fake theory that vaccines
Mr.
cause
Autism guy?
Yeah,
what was his name?
Andrew Wakefield.
Right,
so he's a disgraced former doctor who completely fabricated all of this. And what they've now done is, if you listen to what they say, they are very charismatic. They're very convincing. Andrew Wakefield says that the journalist who exposed him had to do it because he was like basically paid to and by Rupert Murdoch, and he's conflicted. And if you listen to their messages long enough, like they tell you everything you want to hear. It's like pablum, you know, and they completely distort the facts.
If you don't know, if if you are looking for information and you run into one of these videos, I can see how people fall for it.
Right. And the thing is, you're not going to convince the people like, the Andrew Wakefields that are out there and this other guy.
You're not going to change anybody's
You're not going
minds.
to change them. What's interesting, like, so here's the thing. I mean, I think that he was really glad that I called him, and he did. He thanked me in his podcast for like giving him publicity, which is fine, whatever. That's his prerogative. But he played part of an interview that I did with him, and he recorded it. And he had someone recording him with a camera because he knew when I was interviewing him.
He knew the coverage was going to be unpleasant.
Yes, and he knew enough to actually videotape himself doing the phone calls.
It points to him.
So that he could make a little show out of it later.
Yeah,
No,
he's monetizing the anti-vax issue.
And I have the conversation recorded as well. And he basically made it seem as though.
Do you record those too?
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
Yeah, that I only recorded a few facts and I didn't get the story right and all of this, and everything I wrote was factually accurate. And basically the questions were, why are you like spreading these false ideas about vaccines? And that was the crux of the story.
So he would argue with the premise though.
Yeah.
Like they're like you're saying they're false ideas because you're a pharma shill.
Yeah, and the most of the conversation actually, he was trying to ask me my personal opinions on vaccines. I'm like, well, it's not really.
He's asking you?
Yeah,
it's not your.
And I had to say many times, like, this is not my.
I'm a reporter.
Yeah, like this is not. It doesn't matter. Like I'm asking you why you're saying these things.
He's trying to turn it into his interview.
Totally right. Anyway, we didn't. This underscores the bigger issue, which is. Misinformation is rife, and you have the U.S. president attacking, like media. It's gone from health. Like health was the original area where fake news thrived, like where people were saying, like vaccines cause autism, and there's some therapy that's going to cure multiple sclerosis, and so like the health is an area where it's very sensitive to people, and this is where. This fake news, false news, misinformation started, and now we see it seeping into politics, and we see it everywhere.
So enough of on vaccines. We'll switch to opioids. This is we're just one fun topic to the next. So obviously, opioid crisis, not only in Canada but other countries. You were one of the first reporters to jump on that bandwagon, to the point that I don't know what year it was, but the first year that you actually pitched this as a story, you had people looking at you like, "What the hell's an opioid?" Like
yes.
it just wasn't on.
It wasn't on the radar.
So how did you find out about it? Like. How did it come onto your radar screen?
I think
when was it?
So this was going back, and I would like to say it had to be around 2010, 2009, 2010. So there were some researchers in Toronto who would start to send us some of these studies that they were doing. And they're still like leaders in this movement. They're fantastic.
Do you remember who they are?
Well, one of them was David Yerlink, and he's based at Sunnybrook. And he's one of
Shout out to David Yerlink.
Oh, he's amazing. And like the work that he's done in this area, he has helped single-handedly put in a lot of ways put this issue on the radar screens of many, and he was tirelessly with his colleagues and others like him and many others in this field. And so they were some of the original ones to say prescriptions for opioids are going up and they're leading to harms, people are dying. And he was saying to me years ago that Canada doesn't track mortality rates. Why aren't we tracking mortality rates? And so I would argue what's really put this issue on the radar finally after years and years and years is that for the first time, I think it was 2016, Canada did start to track national death rates linked to opioids. I tried to do this myself a few years ago, and we didn't get it off the ground. Like it's very hard to get those numbers yourselves from coroners. Like they wouldn't release it. So, Ontario and BC, I think, would often release their numbers, but other provinces wouldn't. So it was very hard to really get your head around the extent of the problem. And back then, I had an editor tell me that opioids were really not all that bad, that they, they're really great for pain, that you can't get addicted if you're using them for pain.
Who told you this?
An editor.
Okay.
Because I was basically saying this is like a crisis, and there was a lot of, I was at a pain conference in 2015 where leading pain doctors said that the opioid crisis is being overblown. So we have two things that are going on. Most people are dying now because illicit fentanyl has taken over. Like all of the deaths are being attributed, like they're all basically linked to illicit fentanyl, which is coming in to the country, and that's a whole problem unto itself. So the drug supply is toxic. So if you're taking a party drug, chances are it could have fentanyl and you take it once and you die. Or if you're like
how's it getting, who's putting it in there?
So people who are so my understanding of it, and these are conversations with like high level experts who know a lot more than me, So it's coming a lot of it from China, apparently. It's being made synthetically. You can order it on the internet. So if you're like a drug dealer, I'm like, well, if you're a drug dealer, why do you want to kill your client?
Customers,
you know?
Yeah.
But
clients is a little upscale.
Yeah, clients. But it's so cheap and so readily available that they'll happily cut it into all kinds of their product.
But like 1 grain of this will kill you.
It's so deadly, and people don't get that. And so what was happening in the beginning
I don't
is
know if it comes in grains. That's just like
whatever. Like, I mean, it's a powder, I think,
Okay.
But people were taking it. They were trying to buy oxys on the street, and fentanyl was being made to look like oxy. So people were taking it unknowingly. They thought they were taking oxy. They would die. But apparently, it's so cheap and easily readily available, and it's being used as filler in these drugs. So whether it's cocaine or other kinds of drugs, that they don't care if a subset of their clientele dies.
There's always more.
There's always more people, and
Right.
and they're making so much money from it that they don't care. So, and then on this other side of it, like I have people arguing with me all the time that you can't talk about prescription opioids anymore. That's not the problem. The problem is fentanyl. We have to focus on fentanyl. And I'm like, well, if you focus only on the people that are dying, which is terrible in and of itself, 11 people dying every day, there's thousands.
Is that in Canada?
That's in Canada, 11 every day. Thousands and thousands more.
That's like 3,600 people a year.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's out of control. And they say that we've never seen anything like this before in Canada. I mean,
That's a stop the press.
It's
moment.
wild. But you have thousands of people that are...
And you have a lot of people who are ODing and getting resuscitated or like revived or whatever.
Getting revived. It's
like time after time after
people
time.
that are being hospitalized, people that are just taking... But people that are also just taking these pills and they can't get off them.
Right.
And they were being given these pills to treat a chronic pain issue. We now know these drugs really don't help chronic pain. They were sold as the answer to chronic pain.
Right. Well, this is and the stories now about Purdue Pharma and the family are all coming out now.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
It's wild what's happening.
So lighten things up a little bit. And we'll have you back in a couple of months or whatever. Maybe we'll make this a regular feature.
Do it a weekly podcast.
Well, let's not get too excited. What are you watching these days? I know you got to get some downtime after you going after all these hard hitting stories.
Yes.
And so you mentioned before we started recording, you mentioned that someone had done a spoiler.
Oh my God. So I'm not a big movie watcher. I never have been. But now that everything is on Netflix and on demand, so I watch a lot of movies at home and all kinds of TV at home. And so I really have to... But I'm like, I save them all up. So the Oscars are coming up, and I'm like, oh, okay, maybe.
Is it this week?
I think it's this weekend.
I thought it was
Sunday.
in March.
No, because you know why? I follow some people that are there. Like some people, they're Oscars weekend.
One of your friends is the E-Talk.
Yeah, that's why I know that they're all it's all happening. But one of the movies, obviously, A Star is Born. And so I remember everyone talking about this movie, and it's going to make you cry, and it's so sad. And I'm like, oh, I've got to...
You cry pretty easily.
Yeah, as we've discussed, we've covered that ground. So now I'm like, this is... I'm going to have to see this at some point. And so I was sitting the other day in a meeting, and this woman is talking to me, and she said, well, I was sitting down to watch A Star is Born. And it was at this point of the movie, and she just proceeds to tell me exactly what happened.
Was it pretty big?
It's there is no point of watching the movie now. I mean, I guess you could. I'm sure it's still great, but I'm like, you gave away the ending. It's like telling you in Sixth Sense that the guy.
Spoiler alert.
He was dead the whole time. Why would you tell me
that? Which I didn't know. Well, I guess she's assuming you saw it or one of the 2 previous versions of A Star is Born.
But okay, first of all, I didn't realize this was a remake. Second of all, it's still too new. It's been out for only 6 months. It's
already on. So you can get it
But it's too new. # too new.
Anyway, so
it's been remade though.
It was very thoughtful of you not to give away the actual and spoil the movie.
I could. You want me to?
No, I don't care, but my 3 listeners might. So what? And there was some other show you were talking about. What was that?
I'm trying to tell you what happened.
Oh, okay.
Silently.
Shit, great. Okay. So now I think I know how the movie ends. So you're talking about some show?
Yes.
Dating show or something?
Yeah, so this is a show that my husband and I just finished, because we're always and I need suggestions, so if anyone is listening, please give me more ideas. We just finished.
Give them homework now.
I know, right?
Shows to watch.
Write me on Twitter. Tell me what to watch. So Dirty John, we just finished watching that one. So this is with
It doesn't sound good.
The star is Connie Britton. I don't know how to say it, but she's of Nashville fame, and I have to say,
Nashville the show or the city?
Nashville the show, and she was also in Friday Night Lights, which I never watched. But she was so amazing. in Nashville that I loved watching her character. And now, it's only now that I can truly appreciate how great she was. Because you know how you watch, like, someone like Jennifer Aniston? She's just the same.
She just plays the role of Jennifer Aniston in different
in
things.
everything. This, like, Connie is a different person.
It's called acting, I think.
It's amazing. But you see how great she is when you watch, like, Dirty John.
I thought it was a reality show.
No, this is a show about a woman. It's based on a real woman, though. So she basically goes online, she meets a guy, and he becomes everyone's worst nightmare. Like, the guy is a complete psycho. Like, just a nightmare psycho.
Why didn't she just break up with him?
So she okay, like, spoiler alert, she does. That's kind of not really, like, the point. Like, there's a whole lot more that goes on. Like, I think.
So how's the show named after the guy, though, if she breaks up with him?
The whole show, I mean, because it goes into, like, how crazy he is, the things that he does, how manipulative he is, and it's throughout his life. But, like, my husband and I had this debate. Okay, when it's all said and done, he is the bad guy, Dirty John, right?
You know from the title.
Yeah,
awesome.
We know that he is the bad guy. But, like, it's a couple of moments in there when you're like, really? Like, I mean, we're not talking, like, you know, shaming the woman who goes back to her abusive relationship. I'm talking first date stuff was like,
Red
wow,
flag?
this guy,
Red flag
yeah.
City or what?
Right? And so
is this like a true story or what is it?
It's based on a true story. And so the woman, and then the whole thing is apparently the woman she realizes how stupid this all makes her look. Like, there's a point in the show where that's addressed.
Maybe I'll write a book about it.
And she's like, I want to help other women. And I'm like, that's cool. Like, that is, and you know what? I said to my husband, when it's all said and done.
She just wants
she's
telling her story.
She's telling her story, but also, you know, this is a real issue, women being sucked in and, like, violence against women and manipulation and these abusive relationships. They do happen. This guy was, like, kind of bad news from the beginning. And, you know, maybe sometimes.
It wasn't like Friendly John.
It was not. No, I mean, he's kind of.
Affable John.
I mean, so she never sees where he lives or that he has a car or, like, there seems to be some very significant red flags, but there's something that happens on the first date, which is, like, I would never, ever.
What happens? Spoiler alert.
Well, he basically comes on to her and then he just, like, jumps into her bed and won't leave. And she's like, get out of my house.
Call cops.
Yeah. And, like, it was
They'll grab a butcher knife and call the police.
And then he, like, stomps out of her place and slams the door. And then he basically calls her back being like, I'm sorry, I was so excited that our date was going so well. And it would kind of get, it was some really.
That guy's going to be dancing around in a skin dress pretty soon. Like,
I mean,
not,
but on the flip side, part of me wants to say, yeah, but, you know, we all display bad judgment at times. And, you know, what ends up happening, like, the guy's a complete nightmare and psycho. And I do understand women go back to that.
I don't think I'm going to watch this.
You know? You wouldn't like it. No.
What else is going on? We only have a couple minutes. I know you've got to run, but I know that you're on the cooking thing.
Yes.
I just did a podcast interview with Liv B, the vegan YouTuber with like
I've heard of
660,000 subscribers. So your thing is that people, you know, everyone's crushed for time, too much money. People are saying that they don't have time and it's too expensive to make home-cooked meals for your family, and you're saying that's BS. I say,
I not only is it BS, I know it's BS because now I'm living it every day. So I like with a small baby at home, toddler, I work full-time as a journalist, and obviously it's very stressful days, and every night of the week we make a home-cooked meal from scratch.
Give me, like, throw the last 5 meals.
Okay, so and my recent thing that we started doing is I do frozen meals. Like, I make them, freeze them,
it, and then just
in the morning, take it out of the freezer. So we've had the last couple of nights, we had butter chicken, homemade butter chicken. Mm-hmm. Delicious. Tonight we're doing homemade pizza. Last night we had, I believe we had chicken. We had chicken salad. So just, you know.
So like these are not like simple. They're kind of like they're good meals. How long do you think it takes in general for you to slap one of these together?
I will not produce a meal that takes longer than 30 minutes. Like 30 minutes is the max now. So in that length of time.
Start to finish, 30 minutes.
Start to finish. So like a lot of these things mean we don't eat a ton of meat anymore. You know, we do a lot of things.
I got a cookbook here you might be interested in.
Vegan cookbook.
Yeah, there you go.
We do a lot of things in advance. Like, it's all about planning. So, but I would even say, so say you haven't planned for that night's meal. What I would then do is maybe throw together a really quick sauce, buy some pesto, you know, anything, slap together, chop up a zucchini, get some pasta, boil some water, throw everything together with a little bit of pesto, salt and pepper. There's a fantastic meal. It's got veggies. It's delicious. It's so amazing.
You used to do like little, what are they? Was it Instagram stories?
Yeah.
Or where were these little recipes?
I did. I was doing Instagram stories for the Globe, actually, and some people loved it so much. I was actually approached in the street from people that were saying, this is amazing. But I would basically make a 30-minute meal on Instagram.
You should do more of that.
I'm thinking maybe I should now, because I really...
You have nothing but time. You should just do that.
I have nothing but time. The message I want people to hear, because like Canada's Food Guide just came out. It's fantastic. If you haven't seen it, it's a much needed revamp. Like our old...
They got rid of a lot of the lobbyists.
Our old food guide said that like fruit juice and chocolate milk were like part of a healthy diet. And, eat a lot of meat and eat a lot of dairy. They're not. They're a spoiler alert. No, they're not.
We should just call this episode Spoiler
Alert. Like, the new food guide is all about, like, half your plate should be vegetables and fruit, a little bit of protein.
The other half should be, what, cheese?
Yeah, just cheese and beef.
Cheese and wine.
Well, the people who are most upset...
Dairy.
Dairy and beef.
Meat.
They're the meat guys. Like, they're the ones that kind of lost...
Meat guys. You don't have to be so technical here.
The Canadian meat guys.
We went the layperson to understand this.
So... Now we know from numerous studies you don't need to have meat to lead a healthy life. So anyway, the whole message I want people to get is that it's very possible to eat well and healthy even when you're busy and pressed for time. It doesn't have to be hard. And so maybe I will bring my message to the people. I have a big audience on Twitter, and I think maybe I should start bringing that message to them, because this is like life stuff, right? That
maybe there's a cookbook in there for you.
Maybe there is.
So just before we go, Donald Trump.
Yes.
The media is the enemy of the people. I remember we did a talk to a group like a couple of years ago saying you're going to see violence against reporters.
Yeah.
You're actually seeing it.
We're now starting to see it. I think that
when you see these comments, what goes through your mind as a journalist?
It not only it bothers me professionally, and if I was in the States, like sometimes you think you would fear for your safety if you were like a CNN reporter on the air. There's a CNN reporter, I follow his wife, and they have like a small baby, and sometimes I think about them, like how hard that must be. I think he's had death threats. The bigger issue, though, is that like the anti-vaccine movement, people are starting to believe that the media is the enemy of the people. And what they don't realize is that without the media, governments run amok. They have no accountability. They are all powerful.
You get dictatorships.
You do. And you need journalists. I mean, let's look in Canada right now. Without the Globe and Mail, this story about Justin Trudeau and his administration apparently putting pressure on the Attorney General to go easy on a big Quebec company, that would not be out there. Mm-hmm. These stories...
Well, who knows what's happening?
And all the other things that we don't know about. So the media plays a vital role. People don't understand what we do. They think that we're just biased and elitist. And, if they understood what we really do, we are dedicated to bringing the truth to people. And we're not perfect. Sure, we can always improve.
Right.
But... there's a vital role that media plays in democracy, and I think that we've lost complete understanding of that. And I predict that it will take more violence against journalists before this starts to turn around.
Hopefully that's not the case, but we will see. All right, we'll wrap it up. Thanks for being here. Well, this flew by. We have I didn't even touch 2/3 of the topics we had, so we'll have to do this again.
We will.
All right, thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much to Carly for taking the time to chat with me. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe to the show or to leave a comment or a review on Apple Podcasts. It will help other people find the show, and it'll mean a lot to me. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next time.